Hi, this is Miss Simone again, and I am going to be reading the very first chapter of The Mouse and the Motorcycle by Beverly Cleary. So you can see that here's our mouse friend, and he is on a pretty cool looking motorcycle. On the back jacket, it says, "Born to Ride." Ralph is not like other mice at the Mountain View Inn. He is always looking for adventure. It is Ralph's lucky day when the young guest named Keith arrives with a shiny miniature motorcycle. Right away, Ralph knows that the motorcycle is special, made to be ridden by an adventurous mouse. And once a mouse can ride a motorcycle, almost anything can happen. I'll try to zoom in just a little bit. Okay. Sorry. This is my new document camera. So I'm learning where to put it. All right, chapter 1. The new guests. And you can see he's looking out from perhaps his little hole in the wall. And that we have Keith right here. The new guests. Keith, the boy in the rumpled shorts and shirt, did not know he was being watched as he entered room 215 of the Mountain View Inn. Neither did his mother and father, who both looked hot and tired. They had come from Ohio and for 5 days had driven across the plains and desert and over mountains to the old hotel in the California foothills, 25 miles from Highway 40. The fourth person entering the room 215 may have known that he was being watched, but he did not care. He was Matt, 60 if he was a day, who at the moment was the bellboy. Matt also replaced worn-out light bulbs, renewed washers for leaky faucets, carried trays for people who telephoned room service to order food sent to their rooms, and sometimes prevented children from hitting one another with croquet mallets on the lawn behind the motel. Now, Matt's right shoulder sagged with the weight of one of the bags he was carrying. "Here you are, Mr. Gridley, rooms 215 and 216, he said, setting the smaller of the bags of luggage on the rack at the foot of the double bed before he opened the door into the next room. "I expect you and Mrs. Gridley will want room 216. It is a corner room with twin beds and a private bath." He carried the heavy bag into the next room where he could be heard opening windows. Outside, a chipmunk chattered in a pine tree and a chickadee whistled, "Bee, bee, bee." The boy's mother looked critically around the room 215 and whispered, "I think we should drive back to the main highway. There must have been a vacancy sign someplace. We didn't look long enough." "Oh, not another mile," answered the father. "I'm not driving another mile on a California highway on a holiday weekend. Did you see the way that truck almost forced us off the road?" Dad, did you see those two fellas on the motorcycles?" began the boy. And then he stopped, realizing he should not be interrupting an argument. "But this place is so old," protested the boy's mother. "And we only have 3 weeks for our whole trip. We had planned to spend the 4th of July weekend in San Francisco, and we wanted to show Keith as much of the United States as we could." "San Francisco will have to wait, and this is still part of the United States. Besides, this used to be a very fashionable hotel," said Mr. Gridley. "People came from miles around." 50 years ago," said Miss Grizzly, "and they came by horse and buggy." So she's saying that the hotel is old, and it hasn't been fashionable or popular in quite some time. The bellboy returned to 215. Remember, his name is Matt. "The dining room opens at 6:30, sir. There is a ping pong in the game room, TV in the lobby, and croquet on the back lawn. I'm sure you will be very comfortable." Matt, who had seen guests come and go for many years, knew that there were two kinds: those who thought the hotel was a dreadful old barn of a place, and those who thought it charming and quaint, so quiet and restful. "Of course we'll be comfortable," said Mr. Gridley, dropping some coins into Matt's hands for carrying the bags. "But this old hotel is positively spooky," said Mrs. Gridley. She made one last protest. "It is probably full of mice." Matt opened the window on the side. "Mice? Oh, no, ma'am. The management wouldn't stand for mice." "I wouldn't mind a few mice," the boy said as he looked around the room at the high ceiling and the knotty pine walls, the carpet so threadbare that many of the roses had almost entirely faded, and one chair, the antimacassar on its back, the wash basin or sink, and towel racks in the corner of the room. "I like it here," he announced. "A whole room to myself? I usually just get a cot in the corner of a motel room." His mother smiled, relenting. Means she gave in. She's deciding that they're going to stay. Then she turned to Matt. "I'm sorry. It's just that it was so hot crossing Nevada, and we're not used to the mountain driving. Back on the highway, the traffic was bumper to bumper. I'm sure that we will be very comfortable." After Matt had gone, closing the door behind him, Mr. Gridley said, "I need a rest before dinner. 400 miles of driving and then mountain traffic. It was too much." "And if we're going to stay the weekend, I better unpack," said Mrs. Gridley. "At least I'll have a chance to do some drip drying." So she's going to dry or wash a little bit of her laundry. Alone in room 215 and unaware that he was being watched, the boy began to explore. He got down on his hands and knees and looked under the bed. He leaned out the open window as far as he could and greedily inhaled deep breaths of pine-scented air. He turned the hot and cold water on and off in the wash basin sink and slipped one of the small bars of paper-wrapped soap into his pocket. Under the window, he discovered a knot hole in the pine wall by the floor and, squatting, poked his finger into the hole. When he felt nothing inside, he lost interest. Next, Keith opened his suitcase and took out an apple and several small cars, a sedan, that's like a car with 4 doors, a sports car, and an ambulance about 6 inches long, and a red motorcycle, half the length of the cars, which he dropped on the striped bedspread before he bit into the apple. He ate the apple noisily in big chomping bites, and then he laid the core on the bedside table between the lamp and the telephone. Keith began to play, running his cars up and down the bedspread, pretending that the stripes on the bedspread were highways and making noises with his mouth. Vroom, vroom for the sports car, whee, whee for the ambulance, and rrr, rrr for the motorcycle, up and down the stripes. Once Keith stopped suddenly and looked quickly around the room as if he expected to see something or someone. But when he saw nothing unusual, he returned to his cars. Vroom, vroom, bang, crash. The sports car hit the sedan and rolled over off the highway stripe. Rrr, rrr, the motorcycle came roaring into the scene of the crash. "Keith," his mother called from the next room, "time to get washed for dinner." "Okay." Keith parked his cars in a straight line on the bedside the bedside table beside the telephone, where they looked like they were a row of real cars, only much, much smaller. The first thing Mrs. Gridley noticed when she and Mr. Gridley came into the room was the apple core on the table. She dropped it with a thunk into a metal wastebasket beside the bedside table as she gave several quick little sniffs in the air and said, looking perplexed, that means concerned or worried, "I don't care what the bellboy said. I am sure that this hotel has mice. I hope so, muttered Keith. If you mutter, that means you're kind of saying it under your breath. So he's hoping there's mice. That's an interesting hope. If you were in a strange old hotel by yourself and had a whole room to yourself, would you hope that there was mice there? I'm not sure that I would. The next chapter that we're going to read tomorrow is called Motorcycle, and we will hopefully see maybe how Keith and Ralph meet. Fingers crossed. All right, guys, that's it for today. Enjoy your lessons. If you have any questions, please make sure that your parents give me send me an email. All right. Okay. Talk to you soon.